Hot Water History, episode 116. Flying solo today. I don't know where Charlie is. He's off trying to find a final partner for the rest of his life. We hope that that girl is out there for Charlie. Who knows? I know he's scouring all the senior citizens' homes for some lucky dame to be his sugar mama, but he hasn't landed her yet. But I do have, and I'm very happy to welcome to the podcast Angela Erickson, the great Angela Erickson. I'm going to give Angela a little introduction to our audience, and then we're going to have a nice conversation about the goings on, especially with her podcast, which is called Integrated and is excellent. I highly recommend it to everyone if you have the opportunity to take a look at it. Angela Erickson is a pro-life warrior, and her pranom is no accident. She has been a long devoted, active messenger of the body of Christ's constant teaching that all human life is precious, from conception to natural death. She has worked for Students for Life, a Twin Cities pregnancy center, as well as LifeSiteNews.com, wherein she deployed her skills as a marketer and advocate for the most innocent and vulnerable among us. Her work can be found in a number of outlets and publications, ranging from Crisis Magazine to her relevant radio show in the Twin Cities. On top of all that, she's the sublime host of her own podcast, Integrated. Finally, and most importantly, she must be a genius at time management as she homeschools her children while having another applicant to the Erickson homeschool on the way in utero. So, Angela, welcome.
Wow, that was an amazing introduction. Thank you. I'm
So,
very flattered.
so let
Thank
me
you.
just do the de rigueur question. How's the pregnancy going? Are you feeling great? You certainly have the glow. We can see that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am starting to feel better.
Mhm.
There were many weeks of nausea, but we're just coming, I think I'm coming up on 13 weeks now. And so we're just coming out of the first trimester here in the next week or two. So I'm really excited. I can feel I finally have some energy again, which is perfect because we've been taking care of sick kids for the last several days. So I've needed the extra energy.
And at this point, I think you're the only guest that has said the Hot Water History podcast is a reprieve, that you're looking forward to getting grilled by me and
Oh yeah,
Charlie.
no, I love this. I love being interviewed. I think it's super fun.
Oh, and because you're usually the interviewer, so let's talk
Yeah,
about that.
yeah.
Tell us a little bit more about Integrated. What was your goal and objective behind doing it? And I have a little bit of a follow-up question there, but I want you to keep in mind as you're talking about Integrated, which of the which of the guests that you've had on has been most both surprising and very much in line with what you wanted to accomplish, maybe in a surprising manner that you didn't
Mm,
expect.
that's a really good question. So when I launched Integrated, it was at the behest of my husband. Actually, I know some people might balk at that. What women aren't supposed to teach. I hear,
Oh,
but
the feminism quotient just went, the
yeah, I
dial
know,
went
I
way
know.
down. Thank God. Thanks be to God, Angela Erickson.
So I started it because I was just looking at so many of the health issues that we were having in our home, and how integrated the body is, and just a lot of time reflecting on how God made our bodies to give glory to Him, and
Mhm.
and I think a lot of the discontentment that we have today in our culture is because most of us are living these lives, these dualistic lives. And it's like, I think we need to reintegrate the body and soul again so that our bodies are expressing the truth. We're expressing God's, we're
Mm.
glory, His design, His genius, and we're worshiping Him in and through our bodies and what we are doing and saying. And so I started to ask the question, like, how do we do that? How do we integrate the body and soul in a way that expresses in an exterior fashion interior realities? And so I really look at a whole, it's very broad, because I
Mm.
look at cultural phenomena, I look at health, physical health, I look at mental health. We sort of span everything because there are so many aspects to being an integrated person. So that was kind of the genesis, the idea behind integrated. And so my interviews have been very, you could say varied, I guess you could say. Yeah.
They've ranged the gamut, in other
They
words,
really
yeah.
have. I mean, I've had people like Francis J. Beckwith on to talk about apologetics. I've had Carrie Gress on to talk about feminism. I've talked about yoga and things like
Mm.
that with Melody Lyons. But I've also had on Joshua Charles to talk about his conversion story, as well as his sister to talk about her very drastic conversion. So yeah, I mean, it's just kind of been all over the place. So you never know what you're going to get when you tune in.
Yeah, and
And as
his sister Nancy Charles is about as fresh as they come as they in terms of Catholicism.
She really is, and I actually hesitate. I tend to hesitate to interview people that are super new to the faith
Mm,
because sometimes there's a great zeal, and then sometimes that fades away, and then you're kind of left in a lurch in a way because you've promoted this person, and maybe they aren't the best representative of Catholicism
mhm,
long term. But I don't see that in her. She's extraordinarily humble, and that's the other thing too is that when you get people who are really fresh, sometimes their zeal takes over their prudence.
mm.
And I don't see that with her. So I felt very comfortable giving her a platform on my podcast for that
And she
reason.
has a wonderful brother to keep her grounded, and if she should fall astray, he's gonna shoot her a patristic text right away to get her back on the straight
Yes,
and narrow.
exactly. I don't worry about her.
Oh, yeah,
I
Nancy, here's a little Saint Vincent of Lorraine from the
Yeah,
6th century.
exactly. Well, I actually told her,
So
I'm like, you guys kind of remind me of Saint Benedict and Saint Scholastica, like a
oh, that's
modern
what
day Saint Benedict and Saint Scholastica. And she's maybe too fresh to know who they are well enough yet, but I hope she goes and looks at them because she was like, oh, I don't know about, but I really see it,
yes.
don't you?
No, I do. That's a great comparison. I am sorry that didn't come to my mind, so I'm glad it's just that's another one of many contributions already to the podcast because I didn't even think about the connection there, but that's a wonderful insight. Tell me about a guest that who maybe you didn't think was going to be. We don't even have to
Hmm.
downplay them. Just some guests who you were impressed by how much they were integrated with the integrated podcast.
Yeah, well, there have been a few. I mean, Nancy is one of them.
Mm,
Another one, other one that I think I was so genuinely surprised by was Dr. John Bruchalski. He's a former abortionist who runs the Tepeyac Women's Center out in Virginia on the East Coast.
mm, mhm,
But he's a former abortionist. He had a big reversion, I guess you could say, back into the Catholic faith. But he wrote a book called Two Patients, and he describes his conversion, what it was like working in the hospital, committing abortions in one room, and then delivering babies
mm.
in another room, same gestational age. And yeah, just that whole process for him of letting go of sort of the modern ideas that they had in medicine and reconnecting with his faith through Our Lady. So yeah, that was
Wow.
a good interview.
That had to be powerful. So
It
what was
was.
the breaking point for him? Was it just that contrast of being the deliverer of death versus life in adjacent rooms with a wall separating them, an artificial barrier?
Yeah, so he opens his book, and when we talk about this in the interview, but he opens up with a scene where he's in the hospital and there's a baby, that a woman who wants to have an induced abortion, and he was kind of careless. I mean, he wasn't thorough about her examination, figuring out exactly the gestational age of the baby.
Mm,
And so he in one room there's a mom who's in preterm labor, and it's a very stressful, sad situation because there's a lot of fear and worry. And in the
mhm,
other room, this woman is begging for an abortion. And they didn't quite get the gestational age right, and so they delivered the aborted baby. They tried aborting the baby. It actually was delivered alive, which happens a lot more often than abortionists want to admit because that's the
yes.
worst case scenario is that you try to kill a baby and it's born alive.
Mhm,
And the baby was big, like way bigger than he was expecting, and so he actually had to weigh the child to make sure it was under like 500 grams, and it wasn't. And so what that meant, the hospital policy was to resuscitate and give care to that child.
mm,
And so they had to call in extra help, and another OB in there in the hospital came to him and told him to stop sending him. Oh, I can't remember how she phrased it, but she basically said, "Stop doing this. Like, why are you doing this?" She kind of called him out, and he was taken back by this, and then he sort of evaluated this dichotomy of just between these two rooms in the same hour,
Wow.
you know, what he's doing. And then from there, he had some pretty profound experiences that brought him back. But that was sort of the tipping point for him.
Yeah. And you, in your work in the pro-life movement, have probably heard many anecdotes that are similar to that, either from those engaged formally in abortion and abortion clinics, all the way through to those like you and I who were raised either Catholic or converted early and have been dedicated to the pro-life movement. What is it that has, what's been the greatest challenge as you worked in the pro-life movement, and what's been the
Mhm.
greatest solace?
That's a yeah, that's a good question because I've done a lot. I mean, I've
Hmm.
filled almost every kind of role in the pro-life movement. I'm a board member for a pro-life sidewalk counseling organization. I've done sidewalk counseling. Yes, I ran a pregnancy center. Yeah, I've taught apologetics and done trainings on college campuses and worked with students. I've also testified before state legislatures and things like
Hmm.
that. There isn't really anything that I haven't done. I would still say that the hardest things to do are probably pregnancy center work and sidewalk counseling,
Mm.
which is interesting because they go hand in hand. I love doing apologetics. I love training apologetics. I love doing campus outreach. It's like probably my favorite thing is going and talking to people about abortion, which is very weird.
Yeah.
But working with women face to face that are in in dire straits, and you don't know how you can help them, if they will let you help them, and there's a life literally hanging in the balance. That's a very high stakes situation, and I think that is the hardest type of work you can possibly do. I think the men and women who are serving on the sidewalk as the last line of defense,
Mhm.
helping women turn away from abortion clinics, and then the usually women, but some men too, helping out in pregnancy centers. The work that they're doing is just invaluable, and it's hands down the hardest work in my opinion in the pro life movement.
Mhm. There's a friend of the show and someone who both Charlie and I admire deeply as an intellectual, and then someone who contributed mightily to our favorite think tank, which is the Mises Institute, which is in Auburn, Alabama, and it's really the institute is formed by Lou Rockwell and others, including with the imprimatur of Murray Rothbard. It's to keep and promote the ideas of Ludwig von Mises and the Austrian School of Economics and broader libertarianism and anarcho-capitalism to a degree. And it's the former president of that institute. His name's Jeff Deist. And Jeff is pretty adamant, and I don't know if I'm even up to the task, nor am I convinced that his major thesis, especially after COVID, but he saw it developing in even in the years and the months prior to it, that we live in a post-persuasion West.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
therefore his necessary, I think, logical presumption from that point on is the sequitur of we have to separate. Um, and as separation and as we form sort of autonomous and intentional communities, hopefully that's through the proper functioning of those communities, we attract more people to voluntarily engage in this type of culture and
Hmm.
life rather than the destructive or punitive or usurpative or parasitical that is the other
Hmm.
side. My question to you is having so much experience, are we in a post-persuasion state regarding abortion?
Mm. Yeah, I go back and forth on this a lot. Um, I mean, even in just normal conversations with people, you put one thing out on Twitter, it could be really anything.
Mhm.
And how people respond is so telling. It could be the most innocuous thing, and people are so irrational. They're
Yes.
so emotive. And then you apply people who have no emotional regulation to the abortion issue, which is the majority of Americans, especially.
Right.
It's so difficult to have a conversation. They're not even taught basic argumentation or rhetoric, or the distinction between argumentation and rhetoric. They don't know how to,
Mhm.
or philosophy. They have no idea the differences. Um,
Nor do they have a telos. They're not goal
no, they
oriented
don't.
towards some sort of
Mhm.
let's uncover the truth or I need to learn from this person. I am deficient in my knowledge of the biology or the ethics or what have you,
Mhm.
even the economics of what it entails. So they go into the rhetorical phase, but they don't have the tools of persuasion
Right.
by which to engage in any sort of dialectic that's fruitful.
Well, I think most people operate today from the mindset, it's my truth. And so I think a lot of
Mm,
them assume that they already know everything. There's a lack of humility there. Whereas people who are really, really smart, the people
yes.
that I look up to the most, more often than not, assume that they're the idiot in the scenario.
Mm,
Like, and they're always the ones learning and taking in information, even if they know. So for like some of the people I look up to the most in the pro life movement who do apologetics work, um, they will listen to every single person give their argument as if maybe this person will be able to persuade me that abortion is morally neutral, even.
mm-hmm.
That's the underlying assumption going into a conversation. If one person can prove to me that abortion is morally neutral, I will change my perspective on abortion. But people haven't been able to do that yet, and that's because the arguments for the pro-life position are still so much stronger.
Right.
But to give somebody the benefit of the doubt, to treat them as an intellectual equal and think, maybe this person can teach me something. Whereas and that's even from the pro-life perspective.
Hmm.
You're treating other people with that sort of respect, you're going to have a much better, productive conversation on both sides, generally speaking. But I mean, even when I was going to college campuses doing outreach and talking about abortion, I used to be able to convince people on the spot,
Oh.
actually from time to time. I mean, there
Hmm.
were times where people were intellectually honest enough to concede when they were wrong, but that was rare. And
Hmm.
now I look at the political climate today on college campuses, even 5, 10 years later. How long have I been out of doing campus outreach?
You're younger than me, so
It's
it's
probably
gonna
been about
fall.
8 years since I've done campus outreach.
Uh-huh.
And I do think that things have escalated a lot over the last couple of presidential terms, honestly. Things are really polarized. So,
Yeah.
I'm torn. I love to think that we have the capacity for reason because I mean, I like to think I'm a somewhat reasonable person.
Hmm.
I think you're a reasonable person. Um, but I sadly think that that's not the norm, you know?
Right. Well,
I don't
in
know.
many ways, is your answer is well articulated and valid, but I fear as though you're a better person than me in this regard because on this issue, I don't know. I don't have. I'm not persuadable on the other side. Because and let me tell you the reason why. In other words, if I was to be honest with Jeff, I would simply say, no, there's no because we've been in this. I've been
Mhm.
working the pro-life movement since I was in high school and and I've the thing that turns me isn't just the inversion of the arguments.
Mhm.
It's the false empathy that pro-choicers and
Oh, yeah.
pro-abortionists try to create, which I think is
Mhm.
devilish because that's
Mhm.
exactly what the devil attempts to do, is to warp our sensibilities and our nature to what we should feel
Mhm.
compassion about. But it's not even that. It's not even the argumentation. It's not even the rhetoric. It's not even the exchanges on Twitter, which are devoid of very much value. It's the fact that almost without exception, when I've had direct encounters with the most vociferously, "Oh, hi there."
Sorry, she always makes an appearance. It's 'cause,
"Oh, yeah, who's
she's like,
that?"
"This is Veronica."
"Hi, Veron." "Oh, what a beautiful name.
Say hi.
Hi. You're so
Oh,
lovely."
are you
"Uh-oh, did I
mean
scare
mugging
you?
him?
I'm so sorry. I'm being so serious with mommy. We should just be playing, right, you know? Bye, Veronica." Um,
John, sorry, I have another kiddo. No, John, it's
"Oh,
time for you
no."
to go to bed. Can you close the door? Thank you. Yeah,
Well,
I know. It's just
bring
wild
John
things.
on. Maybe I could scare him just as much.
Shut the door, buddy. You gotta close the door, man. Thank you. We'll read your guardian angel prayer, or John Paul II after. Not right now. Please go. Good night. I love you. Bye.
So full
Bye.
disclosure, Angela actually doesn't have a son, John. She was just playing up her Catholic angle by saying that
Oh,
she's doing the guardian angel. Just
well,
kidding.
he has like a pamphlet. I think it's actually
Oh,
his John Paul II pamphlet, who he's named after.
oh,
Um,
wonderful.
and so he's like, Mom, I want to read this. It's a little autobiography about, or not autobiography, it's a biography about John Paul II.
Well, if you want to run and do that, that's cool. We can
No, I would much rather.
delay
I'm
delay.
nursing now. We've got a baby that, or
Yeah.
toddler.
Oh,
Yeah, I'm
beautiful
stuck here
family.
anyway.
So anyway,
Thank you.
what I was getting at in my long-winded way was it wasn't all of the exchanges that I've had that I just realized how vacuous and empty and truly malevolent and evil the pro-choice side. At best, they're extraordinarily ignorant, but
Hmm.
that's often I think that's giving them too much credit almost. Where I see it is that they become demonic. I mean, I
Mm,
can't tell you the number of times where I've had epithets shouted at me or to fellow pro-life, when I'm had students out at a clinic or something like that.
mhm,
The contortions of the face, what's said,
mhm.
what is uttered, it's bestial.
It is.
It's
It
not
can
human.
be. Yeah, I mean,
Mhm.
I've definitely had that experience as well, many, many times. In fact, I had a gentleman at UW Platteville. He literally he looked like Loki. He looked
Mm,
like black hair, just blue, striking blue eyes, a long trench coat, and he was screaming at me on campus doing a display. It's very interesting, but I also found that those opportunities allowed me to engage with him, and a lot of people were forming a circle around us to listen to this conversation. And so I was able to present myself as the reasonable,
mhm.
affable pro-lifer, and he looked crazy.
Yeah.
Which is not a good look for most people. But I will say too, to your point, um, I do think there is obviously a lot of malevolence. I do think that, and this is where I think maybe this is more of the feminine nature, and seeing
Mm,
just how broken families are generally. Um, I think a lot of women have really been so deeply misled and wounded by a lot of the men in their lives. And so
yes.
abortion becomes a very appealing option when there are so many weak men, and when you're a woman and told, for example, your whole life that your potential is going to be found in a career. I mean, it's never once implied that when someone tells a young woman, "Oh, you have so much potential," they
Mm,
never mean you're going to be a great mom someday.
no.
They never do. They always
Mm-mm.
mean you're gonna have, like, this really big, impressive career, you're gonna be traveling the world, you're gonna be doing whatever you want, you're gonna be a dink. Um,
Yeah,
like, that's
right?
really that's what they are the aspirations they're instilling in young women. And so when life doesn't, when things happen unexpectedly, like a child, and two, if you're not rooted in Christ or anything like that, and you have weak men in your life, abortion becomes a very appealing, quote unquote choice, you know?
Yeah, and it's sold as being, of all things, empowering.
Oh, exactly. And it's like could not
Empowering.
be it could not be more disempowering.
Correct.
Um, and that's again, like I look at the integration piece, and it's like, so our bodies are made to reflect in an interior and exterior way God's glory.
Mhm.
And you have people who are, well, whatever I think, therefore I am, right? I
Yes.
think, therefore I am. And that's so divorced from the reality of what's going on in their body. Well, I think I shouldn't be pregnant, so I shouldn't be pregnant. Well, there's a
Mhm.
baby already in you. Like, even the
That's right.
way people talk about pro-life stuff or abortion, they're like, well, if it's not wanted, then it's not human, basically.
Precisely. Yes, as if
And
personhood comes from volition.
yes, exactly. And
Right.
it's like, no, that's not reality. That's the division, the divorce that we've created within ourselves. And that division is instilled in women from the time they start getting their cycles. I mean,
Mm-mm.
they go to the doctor around when they start to hit puberty, and instantly the doctor's like, you should be on birth control.
Mm.
Why? Because in their mind, fertility is a disease. Fertility, a woman's
Yes.
cycle, there's something wrong with that. And so they have to,
Mhm.
quote unquote, treat it. Same with pregnancy. You get pregnant and they act like pregnancy is like a sexually transmitted disease that needs
Yes.
to be taken care of. It needs to be dealt with in some
Mm,
way. And so they're going to medicalize it one way or the other. They're either going to do the abortion or they're going to hyper medicalize birth and make it seem like your body is not actually supposed to have babies. Like physiological birth is not a thing. And so they make the woman distrust her body's ability to give birth. And then they have the child and they're doing everything they can to separate the mom and the baby from the start.
right.
So, I mean, it's like all of these things, it's so multifaceted, there's so many layers to it, and so when I look at the abortion issue, I have so much compassion. I know because I know so many women who are post-abortive, family members, things like that, and so I try to keep those things in mind when I do see that juxtaposed with the, like, super crazy, nasty,
Yes.
demonic.
Mm, hmm.
Because that's so true. That is
Right.
that is the undercurrent of the movement.
Hmm.
And then a lot of these other women, they're collateral damage.
Yeah. Speaking of that avoidance of dualism, are have you taken a look at or had anyone on regarding different forms of medicine and sort of alternative medicine?
Mm.
Like I just listened to a podcast, a friend, a great friend of ours is James Dellingpole out in the UK, and I think he's got the best podcast going. No offense to you or I or Charlie, but
I'm super offended.
I could tell. So, but he had an osteopath on from in England named Michelle Davies, and I was just, I have to admit that I was rather naive about how different and how seemingly integrated and truly Catholic osteopathy was as an
Mm.
alternative form of medicine. Have you investigated that at all, or?
That is not a kind, of medicine that I have investigated.
Mhm.
I've been burned by the medical establishment pretty significantly over the years. I think a lot of people have, but maybe a lot of people don't even realize it.
Right.
2020 was definitely an awakening for me. But for many reasons, I had my fourth child, and that was right in August 2020. I gave birth to my fourth kid in the hospital. They wanted me to wear masks. My husband, they had just changed protocols so that my husband could now go out and go home and come
What a
back
wonderful
without.
concession on the part of the
Oh, I
hospital.
know, I know. And I was told all this at my 36-week appointment. I remember telling my OB, like, if I wasn't right at the end of my pregnancy right now, I would seriously consider a home birth because
Mm,
I don't, I don't like supporting an institution that I think is actually harming women and children.
yes.
I don't like that. And so I haven't been back, since,
Yeah.
we had a home birth with our fifth, but in that time, my fourth child, the labor was fine, but he had a lot of issues with tongue ties, things like that. Very colicky, he had a lot of dysregulation, couldn't get any answers. And then all of a sudden, I was starting to realize that I had a ton of health issues. I've had autoimmune disease for quite some time, and I started doing more investigating. And I was like, all of these things are actually related,
Mhm.
in some capacity. And again, the integration piece. Um, it was really his health stuff, and then that dovetailed with my health stuff. And I just realized, like, wow, his whole body is completely dysregulated, and that these are the
Mm.
symptoms, and
Mhm.
it's his brain development, it's the fascia in his body, it's all of this stuff, it's all coming together. It's impacting his nursing, it's impacting his temperament. He was behind on all of his milestones and reflex integration. It was crazy. And so that's when I was like, I'm done. Like, I'm not going to this type of a practice anymore. I don't support allopathy. I'm
Yeah.
not saying, I think in acute care
Mm.
it makes sense,
Yes.
but in terms of primary care, I think we have to be our primary care providers.
Mm.
We have to be advocates for ourselves.
So well said. I was scandalized. I was in a conversation several years ago with two doctors. They happened to be a couple, a good Catholic couple, in fact. And I asked them one day, just out of the blue, I said, how much time in medical school do you allot or is spent on just basic nutrition?
Like a day.
Not even a day. They said
Yeah.
like an hour.
Yeah. No, they
And
just
I
push pills. They push pills. That's what it
precisely,
is. Yeah.
precisely.
Yep. That's
And,
exactly it.
and I said, do you ever, and I kind of probed them a little bit further because they were obviously they were themselves kind of scandalized by that, recognizing that many of
Mhm.
the conditions, in fact, maybe a preponderance of them, had to deal with diet, mental health, you
Yes.
name it, spiritual problems. And this is what
Mhm.
that osteopath was talking about, how they do integrated care. They could tell when you're suffering from anxiety just from a kind of phrenetic
That's so
you know,
interesting.
yeah, it was really I want to go to an osteopath. I have to tell you, I just want to get and
Just to
a lot
see.
of unfortunately a lot of DOs are stereotypically lumped in with just, oh, you're just a bone cracker chiropractor.
Yeah, kinda like woo-woo
Yeah,
medicine.
yeah,
Yeah.
but it didn't
Mhm.
sound it sounded, and they go to school, they go to the same rigorous training, but of course they take into account things like nutrition and
And
uh
trauma, like, that's another I
trauma,
think that's
trauma, yeah.
super overlooked, like, so I have gone to a practice where they do nutrition response testing, that's a
Hmm.
whole 'nother thing, I'm, like, not I don't know, I have mixed feelings about it, but it seems interesting, the practice is Catholic, that I have gone to, all the people there are super Catholic, they pray with you, that kind of a thing, and pursue a natural route of healing. But that's one thing I always I when I first went in there and scheduled an appointment, I said, "How do you guys approach this with like trauma? Is this trauma-based care at all?" Because a lot of autoimmune conditions, which I have had for most of my life, are rooted in trauma. And people don't understand the body keeps the score. And this is something I
Yes.
talk about a lot is the body
Yeah.
keeps the score. And so when you experience trauma, especially from an early age, your physiology changes and that
Absolutely.
has a long-term impact, especially if you have elevated levels of cortisol for most of your life, you're living in a state of fight or flight, that's going to change your brain
Adrenaline.
chemistry. That's yes, all of it. It's going to burn your adrenals. It's going to change your endocrine system, and which then impacts your puberty and everything else. I mean, it's like people don't understand the way that this impacts the body, and I wish people did again see that integration. It's not just what you're putting into your body, but it's the stress that you're living in as well, and we're also a very stressed society.
Mhm. Well,
Yeah.
Lord was very instructive in that, right?
Mhm.
Let's get back to just going back a little bit to feminism. You
Mhm.
had Carrie Gress, who is
Yeah.
someone I admire as a scholar, and the her most recent work has been going back, and this was a suspicion that I always had, but I never really went down the rabbit hole. And she's gone down the rabbit hole and uncovered substantial evidence that when we tend to differentiate, especially in American history, between the various waves of feminism that have
Mhm.
impacted American society and American men and women, we tend to differentiate between the sort of good suffragists of the first wave versus the second wave, who were the real achievers and go-getters and the, Annie Oakleys of the world, and then the third and fourth wavers that are even among conservatives are seen as, well, they're off base, but they had at least, and especially in my own sphere of libertarians, I'm sorry, the third wavers are like kind of heroes,
Right.
especially among many women, because that's where sexual liberation came from, and all the supposed artificial taboos of strict Christian society were done
Mhm.
away with. And women all of a sudden, because they were able to gain the pill, somehow found that they always had agency, which always struck me as odd, as if women were in an
Mhm.
infantile state in terms of their development until, I don't know, Betty Friedan came out. But
Right.
anyway, it's like, so Carrie says, no, this was actually a nefarious movement from the beginning. You want to take that away?
Yeah, so she outlines pretty thoroughly that many of the women who started off even with the suffrage movement, the earliest feminists, many of them were involved in the occult, and that's not really at all surprising,
Mm-mm.
um, at all. But I think a lot of people were sort of scandalized because we have been given this narrative that Susan B. Anthony, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, all
Yeah.
these people, and Elizabeth Cady Stanton
Julia
was
Ward
like one of
Howe.
the she was like a Christian, but then she like rewrote her own Bible kind of a thing, if I'm not
Yes.
mistaken. And
Hmm.
it was very occultish and weird and just very not Christian at all. It was this very bizarre thing. And she
Yeah,
basically got kicked out of the suffrage movement
right. Look at
because
look
she
at
strayed
Julia
too
Ward Howe
far.
writing The Battle Hymn of the Republic. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. She's equating the Union Army with avenging angels.
Hmm.
It's really and Harry Beecher Stowe was a whack job. I
Yeah, I
mean,
think a lot of them were, and a lot of them too, a lot of the early feminists, probably in almost every single wave, I would venture to bet.
mhm,
Um, there was also a lot of lesbianism from the
yes.
beginning, um, which is another aspect of this so-called sexual liberation movement. But a lot of them too had bad relationships with their moms. And
Mm.
that's always a really interesting component to me because I do think, yeah,
What a shocker
exactly.
that their moms were judgmental in Congregationalist New England, right?
Right, right.
And they didn't have the warmest relationships with their fathers, you know?
They didn't have, yeah, I mean, there are daddy issues and mommy issues, but the thing is, like, a woman that, the role of motherhood is so formative for
Mm,
women, and so if they haven't connected with their mothers, they're seeking that connection elsewhere.
mm.
I do think that that's sort of part of the pathology is, this desire to have affection, this more maternal affection, and so there's a draw to that if that's been missed in your life.
Yeah, and much like the current abortion industry and the culture that is so underlying and sort of girding the whole pro-abortion industry movement, sentimentality, whatever you might say, there's a lot of glommers on
Mhm.
who are essentially they are panderers. They take advantage of and make sure that whether it's pre-abortion or post-abortion, that these women are become kind of a means by which they're able to advance their careers or their
Mhm.
notoriety. I was thinking of how, and Carrie talks about this, I believe, in one of the books. At least I was listening to her interview with Tom Woods on his podcast, and she was saying about how the cult within the feminist movement really picked up post-Civil War because so many of those women had lost sons or
Mhm.
brothers or husbands, and they were
Mhm.
getting into the occult to communicate with them yet again. So
Yep.
again, this is that uh, just a total taking advantage of someone's just deep sorrow and tragedy.
Well, I mean, there it's just part of the condition of man, especially one who is prone to sin, right?
Hmm.
And the influences of the enemy. He's always looking at our wounds, right? Like
Yes,
he knows us from the time from the begin. Like the demons are aware of our existence as we
especially
start as
our
well.
emotive and
Yes,
spiritual
yeah, even though they
conditions.
can't read our minds or anything, they become
Right?
extremely familiar with our behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And they know our wounds. They have witnessed those wounds, and so they're going to put their fingers in there, and they're going to tempt us to do things like that. And especially when there's a lot of people suffering like that, who are seeking connection and community, it just is ripe for that kind of cultist to form. Hmm.
Yeah, and in my work, including the our most recent book that I wrote with or co-wrote with Charlie, which was History of the United States, I do talk about how one of the key aspects of that supposed first wave feminism of suffragists and even their because they're lionized today, of course, because there was a significant and to a degree sincere element of abolitionism.
Yeah.
But people don't scratch the surface of their abolitionism. They weren't concerned about the slave per se. They were concerned about how corruptive Southern culture was because of the institution of slavery. So they were judgmental of Southern society. That was their their main
Modus
motive of
operandi.
operation, but
Yeah.
also their main impetus and drive. It wasn't some sort of humanitarian effort.
Interesting. Yeah, I
Yeah.
didn't know that. That's
Yes.
really
If you look at the
so
rhetoric,
interesting.
of course, when you read Sojourner Truth, she has a different perspective, and she is much more concerned about the here and now, about the plight of the slave. Or when they actually have Frederick Douglass give a speech or something like that, that's when they feign oftentimes
Huh.
a sincere and authentic concern for the plight of the slave in the here and now. But otherwise, they're talking in their rhetoric, they're all talking about how paternalistic slavery, the South is, and in part they, of course, blame that paternalism on the slave system.
Hmm.
Um,
Wow, that's so
yes, so
interesting.
it was
Seems very
It's very
convoluted.
cold. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
I don't like Puritans and I don't like New Englanders by and large. Sorry, I just took off a
Fair.
segment of our audience, but it's basically true. We Midwesterners are much warmer, I think,
Yeah.
even though
I
our
don't know.
climates
I
are
don't know.
cold.
Have you met the Scandinavians here in
Oh, that's
Minnesota?
true. I'm not even,
They're
yeah.
very stoic. I
I have.
married one.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, you got the Erickson name for
Yeah,
sure.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, well, I want to get to our fun segment. Oh, wait, before I do that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I gotta try to scandalize you a little bit if I haven't already. And that is I
Not
do want
yet.
to get into your perspective because the one thing that makes our podcast and work novel, even in my academic work, is I've been trying to, and my forthcoming book, which I hope will come out in maybe 16 to 18 months, we'll keep my fingers crossed on that, is about reconciling anarcho-capitalism with Catholicism. So, especially given what you've confronted, either in the pro-life movement or just trying to live out authentically your Catholic faith
Mhm.
as a mother, as a podcaster, as someone who's contributed mightily, whether it be in college settings or beyond. What are your feelings about the state, the government, whether it's at present or is something you
Yeah.
realized about it beforehand?
Well, I live in a dictatorship called Minnesota.
We're gonna get to that in the next segment. Yeah.
My husband and I have been trying to leave the state now for, I don't know, over a year.
I'd invite you to Illinois, but that's like going
Not much
from
better.
the bubbling pool of tar to the pits of hell on earth. So
Oh, yeah. Mm, I don't even know where to start, honestly. I think there's a
y-
part of me that just wants a secession to happen and for things to just to let people vote with their feet and
this isn't working, would you say?
yeah, I don't think it's working. We're too polarized,
Mm,
and I don't know how you bridge that gap. I mean, if COVID showed us anything, it was like exactly it. You could literally see it right in front of you.
that's the
Are you wearing
blessing
a
of
mask
COVID.
or not? Are you a Karen like screaming at people in
Hmm.
Target because they're not wearing a mask or not? I mean, I
Right.
remember going to Chuck E. Cheese for a birthday party for my nephew, and everyone there
And
is
the
wearing
animated
masks.
characters in the band had masks on and
No, well, I don't even think they had them coming out, but I'm like, you have a bunch of slobbery kids, and at that time, the kids didn't have to wear masks, like the really young ones, you know?
mhm,
'Cause I'm like, you have a bunch of slobbery kids spitting, and like, obviously, the masks are not stopping the flow of this stuff. I mean, I'm
right,
like, are what do people have two brain cells left? I don't even
right.
know anymore. And I remember, I my one of my brother-in-laws and myself were the only ones there not wearing masks. And I remember they asked, like, are you sure you don't wanna put one on? They, like, tried to get us to put them on. We're like, "No, we're good." But, I
Mm,
mean, I just remember being like, "You're at Chuck E. Cheese." Like,
yeah,
what? Like, where like, this is where you're gonna pick up the most stuff of anywhere. It's like, it
exactly.
just what's the point? Yeah, I mean,
I
in
mean, the only
terms of,
thing that
like,
would rival a Chuck E. Cheese during COVID in terms of
the
germ
hospital
concentration would, yeah, be
the
well,
hospital.
excellent point. But I was thinking more like a hot tub or a whirlpool at some
Yeah,
cheap motel. I mean, that's what.
like wearing the mask in the hotel.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. And you're like
exactly.
bearing it all. Well, that was the thing. Is like even when I was in labor, I was supposed to wear a mask. Everyone else, and then I'm like, you're literally in my business right now.
Hmm.
Do you think that like a mask is really going to do anything for you except hinder my breathing, which for a woman in labor, your breathing is everything for pain
Yeah,
management. So I just was like, this is the dumbest thing ever.
yeah.
Just like you
Sing
guys
it, sister. Sing it.
I know. I just so I don't know. Like,
No, well,
is there
and then the
hope?
other
I
thing,
don't know.
it's so funny I asked you that question leading down the primrose path to Rothbardianism, because you have that beautiful flag in the back, which is the takeoff
Oh,
of the
yeah.
Gadsden flag, where I tread where I please. What a beautiful
Yeah.
flag. I mean, I would fly that one, but I'm proudly the only person in the Chicagoland area that actually flies the anarcho-capitalist flag
Oh my
in
goodness.
socialist Chicago. So I love getting people like driving by or walking by and they go, "What is
What is
that
that?
flag?" And I'm more than happy to explain it to them. And then when I explained it to them, whereas they were walking or driving by slowly, they take off and run.
Yeah.
Uh,
We have somebody, down the way who have they have a Bigfoot flag, and I love that.
Mhm.
Like, I want a Bigfoot flag.
That's great, that's great. Oh, awesome. All right, are we ready for our segment, Angela
Let's
Erickson?
do it. Let's do it.
Okay, well, welcome to Annoy Our Guest. So, if you're unfamiliar, and people in the audience should be familiar with this by this point, I mean, we've done it with Kennedy Hall, we've done it with other guests. Oh, we did it with Trevor Alcorn,
Oh, I love
Trinity.
Trevor. He's a
Yeah,
good dude.
what a
So is
saint of a
Kennedy.
man. God bless Trevor. Soon enough, we'll
Amen.
be drinking. Well, you won't be drinking because you'll
Not
be
for a while.
breastfeeding, and then, but soon enough, you'll be drinking Trinity beer, and when it comes out in stores, hopefully, so I don't have to call him up and annoy him. I always
Yeah.
feel like I'm obligating him to give me free beer,
Oh,
and the fact that he gives me free beer, I'm not terribly sorry about, though. Okay,
yeah. Yeah.
so he's our sponsor, so we have to say good things about him
Mm.
too, anyway.
I
So
actually, one of my cups in my
oh,
glass
there you
is,
go. Yeah.
yeah. I'm not sponsored,
My
but
one mug broke, so I have to
oh
go get a
no.
new one, you know? All right, here we go. So, again, the rules are such that I'm going to name several things, somewhat random, some in keeping with, and knowing that these are going to pique Angela's annoyance. But we're going to see just how much I'm accurate in the level of annoyance that she's going to experience. So she's going to say, I'm going to say the thing. I'm going to let her give a number. One is this doesn't really annoy me at all. Nice try, Gary. You failed. All the way through to 10. Oh my God, I want to commit deadly homicide. Okay. As opposed to safe homicide, which doesn't exist.
Oh.
Okay. Are we ready, Angela? And then you're going to riff
I'm
on that
ready. I
number
like
and
the
we'll
I like
comment on it.
no, I love where this is going.
It's very cathartic, I promise. This is
One
this is
1 to 10 right now, we're at a 1. This is
okay,
great.
good. Well, even if it's annoying, it's cathartic because you're getting it out. And this is like I consider it kind of like a prenatal vitamin, you
Oh,
know?
yeah. No, that makes sense. It's like
Even like
therapy.
that.
Yeah.
We're integrated here. Okay. Number one. This is good. I have to say this is one of my favorite. Child labor laws. What do you
Oh,
think? Should they exist? Do they annoy you?
yeah. No, they don't annoy me.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Because I
I
saw
don't
it.
think
The
so.
reason
Maybe.
that this, can I tell you why I include
Yeah,
that?
why?
Because you put a post on Twitter about how much benefit, I think it was your son or one of your kids was getting from like getting early work.
Oh, I mean, I've had it's so interesting that you bring this up actually, because recently somebody was asking me about a fear of parentifying children. And
Oh,
I think they're
parentify.
I shouldn't roll my eyes, but it's like, my older kids I have expectations in our home about like how they contribute, and it's developmentally appropriate contributions.
Hmm.
But I think a certain generation, some people call them boomers,
Yeah.
didn't let their kids do anything or have any responsibility
Yes.
because they wanted their children to be children, and I want my children to be children too. That's one of the reasons I homeschool. But my job is to prepare them for life.
Yes.
So so
Right.
yeah, I do believe I don't know enough about child labor laws to have a super strong opinion on it. Some laws are like really dumb, but it's more of regulatory stuff. Like
Yeah.
if my kids have a lemonade stand, they have to get a permit they have to get a permit and then do taxes and stuff, which is stupid to me.
Yes.
Um, that so actually from that end of things, I think it's really stupid. But in terms of child labor laws, I mean, when you look at the Industrial Revolution, children were in the mines dying. Um, when mining was having all of these jobs were being given to kids as early as 18 months old. And so no, those laws were super important for saving children's lives, and so, yeah, I mean, all things in moderation when it comes
Mm.
to protecting our children. We have to be reasonable and moderate, and I think,
Mm.
and people just lack moderation
All
today.
right, for our next episode, we're going to go down the rabbit hole of whether the Industrial Revolution was actually good for kids or not. I think that's a narrative that we're told.
So, no, I think I by and large would agree with you. I
Okay.
think the Industrial Revolution has done a lot more harm than good overall.
Oh, see, I'm on the other side.
Really?
Oh, yeah, because I mean, remember, we have to think of it. They didn't come from. I mean, as the first agricultural, then commercial, and then industrial revolution. No one wants to talk about the agricultural revolution. That essentially you
That's
have
true.
these 90-95% rural populations, and once the processes became mechanized
Mhm.
and food is being produced at this enormous
In
rate,
mass,
you
yeah.
have these huge populations during a population boom. that have no employment, they have no human capital, they have no skills, they have nothing. And so what we could tell, and this is going to sound very Austrian school, but what all we could tell from what we call a praxeological standpoint is that they preferred when they moved into the cities, no one was driving them like in
Mhm.
a collectivist Soviet Union like Lenin and Stalin into the cities to into the factories. They were voluntarily going because they had no other choice
Right.
and this was their only means of sustenance. So oftentimes we contrast, and this is because we're prone to presentism. We say, "Oh, they went from a an idyllic," and Pope Francis does this, which drives
Oh,
me
yeah. I
crazy.
mean,
This idyllic, like agricultural life. I'm
no,
sorry.
homesteading is hard, and
w- it-
farming is hard.
yeah, if you
Yeah.
look at, and we have evidence of this in 18th century Austria. So we're talking about proto-industrialization going on there. Life was so full of drudgery, and there was such a population boom, and again, there's not enough employment in the countryside to, render these people valuable. So there are all these stories from Austria that Joseph II, the Austrian emperor, had to outlaw impressment, where families were taking children and just burying them and
Mm.
suffocating them in their bed because they couldn't
Yes.
feed them.
Yeah, women
And
were doing
so
that, they were while they were co-sleeping with their children. That's
right. So
also
in
yeah.
these proto-industrial societies, like a case in point in our own day is the UN several years ago, and this is from Ben Powell, who wrote a great book called Socialism Sucks and everything like that. And he's a scholar at Texas Tech. He's an economist, and he said he wrote or 50 years or 20 years ago, the UN made contingent upon some loans they were going to give out to Bangladesh that children had to go to school in Bangladesh. And well, sure enough, the Bangladeshi government forces all the kids into school so they could prove to the UN that the kids are at school. We get these funds, we get these easy loans, which turned out to be disastrous for their economy anyway, as it turns out to be when you deal with the IMF. But
Mm,
anyway, of course, what happened when you force the kids into school and out of the factories, right?
mhm.
The kids then their families become more impoverished
Right.
because they're not producing anything, they're not contributing anything. And sure enough, when you don't allow them to go back into the factories, they went into child prostitution.
Yeah, I mean, there were
So
some serious problems there, and then on the flip side of that, I will say about the Industrial Revolution and all of these changes,
mhm,
because I guess I looked at it more from the perspective of families being at home together, the mother and father both being at home. And
yes.
then with the Industrial Revolution, you have men leaving the home to work,
Mhm,
and
mhm,
then women were left to do the child rearing
yep,
exclusively by themselves in the
right.
homemaking and everything, which was a huge shift. Nancy Pearcey actually talks about this in her latest book about the toxic war on masculinity,
Yeah.
and she writes about how, like, child rearing books actually used to be written for men. That
Mm.
may shock a lot of people, but
Yeah,
it was actually
yeah, I'm
written
gonna
for
even go
men.
further, the fact that we transferred to and it was so drastic,
Mhm.
going from the extended family to the nuclear family is seen
Yes.
in everything from our policies to I mean, think about how what a revolution people don't understand Social Security was. The
Yeah.
whole Social Security
Yeah.
ploy, wherein you would have a a just duty to care for the elderly as they could no longer work and produce. And so those
Right.
familial ties were wonderful. And the grandparents would stay in the home or the great uncle, and they would be there to raise the kids or to be in the kids'
To
lives,
help. Yeah.
right, to help out. And and therefore, because there was a mutuality and a symbiotic relationship there, there was real care. There was a
Yeah.
fostering of care. But when you reverse that, now you and I in our generation and previous generations are largely often asking them for help.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And then when they are annoying or don't become useful or we become financially independent within our nuclear family setting,
Yeah.
we usher them off to a home
Mhm.
because we want the inheritance, but we don't want to care for them.
Right.
And in many
Yeah.
ways, we're not economically able to care for them because our taxation is so high.
Well, that's part of it too, and I think because, older generations, they are expecting their Social Security and what have you,
Yes.
it changes the way that they interact with their children as well.
For
because
sure.
they're not
For sure.
expecting their children to care for them in the future.
Yeah.
And that's something that nobody is talking about.
Mm-hmm. It's amazing too. We brought up the boomers. I don't want to wreck on boomers, but
Yeah.
a Forbes piece just came out about 2 years ago, and they were saying that the boomer generation, the boomer generation expected like an enormous sum from the previous generation. Hi.
Yep.
An enormous sum for the previous generation. But guess what? The boomer generation expects to give less as a percentage to their children, while our generation expects just as much, if not more, from the boomers, which is that's going to be a problem if it's not
Yeah.
already a problem. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think a lot of boomers and even Gen Xers, I might have to,
Hi, is that
I might
Veronica?
no, that one is that's Paige.
Oh, hi, Paige. I love your haircut.
She you love he loves your
Yeah, nice
haircut,
little bob.
Paige. You need to go. Yep. Good night. Yep, good
My
night.
girls used to get their haircut like that, but now they're too old. They want to grow it out. I think
Uh
the shorter hair
so
looks
I
cute.
cut her hair like that because she got a comb stuck in it.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
All right, are we ready? Are we ready for the next one?
Yes, just
So the
about.
child labor laws didn't annoy you.
Not too much. No, not enough.
Now that being said,
I would say like a, I don't know, 3.
three,
We'll say
okay.
a 3.
And I
I
just,
think
yeah, especially in our current time, I just think the kids are losing out on entrepreneurialism. They're losing out on just decorum in a workplace, expectations, proper dealing with customers, coworkers. And then, and we hear this in the complaints as they go into the workforce about how
yeah.
terribly unprepared and
But I think a lot of that is public
ill-informed
school.
they
I
are.
don't think that that's
Oh, that's true too. Yeah.
I don't know that it's necessarily that they're not starting early. I mean, I had a job. My first job I was detasseling corn when I was like 14.
Hmm.
Which is I mean, that's a hard job. It's hot
God,
and
we are Midwesterners. You're
yeah.
detasseling corn, you know?
Oh yeah, yeah. I was actually disappointed I never got to do any rock picking or roguing.
Yeah,
You
right.
guys it's time to
Okay.
go.
So here's, is that still, oh, there's Paige still. Okay. I'm sorry about my cold. Every time I laugh, I kind of cough. I feel like
No, that's
you
okay.
must
I
think I
get it.
smoke like a pack of Marlboro Reds a day, but I don't.
Oh, at least
Yeah.
one.
Okay. This is what we were alluding to earlier. What the left has done to Minnesota.
That's straight up 11 out of 10.
11 out of 10. It's destroyed it's a beautiful state. Land
And
of 10,000
they're
lakes.
destroying it. Yeah.
Mhm. In what way has the left been most destructive? Just a climate of irresponsibility, a climate of, you know, usurpation, collectivism.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. I mean, well, it's like all of the above. I mean, it right
Yeah.
now, Democrats run the governorship, the Senate, and the House.
Mm,
Um, so they have every branch of government, the attorney general, everything. And so they are just shoving everything through that they possibly can. I mean, they shoved the most extreme abortion laws, some of the most extreme abortion laws in the country last year, and now they're
yeah.
trying to work that into our state constitution,
Mm,
along with an equal rights amendment, which I don't know if you're familiar. I'm sure you're familiar with what they are, but it's like
yeah.
there's like nothing stopping them. I mean,
Oh,
and there's not a single pro-life Democrat. There's all I mean, they already even when I was at the legislature last year testifying, listening to some of these legislators talk about pregnant persons, um,
the pregnant person. Yeah.
eliminating women
Hmm.
altogether. There's just it's I don't even know where to start, and we haven't even talked about the economics of like what's going on in our state. I mean, we're shipping in illegal immigrants and we're paying for their housing and stuff. I mean, there are hotels that our tax dollars are going to. We pay for 4-year universities for immigrants that are coming here right now. I mean, we're all of our tax money and then we'll have like a surplus of tax dollars that the government gets and then they don't give it back to the people. They just like
Yeah.
give out like a portion of it and then they reallocate it to other pet causes and lobbyists and
Well, I'm from
it's just
Illinois. What
gross.
was that S word you used? Surplus of tax
Oh,
dollars.
I know. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
we've had huge surpluses the last couple of years because they're
Mhm.
taxing us so much, and now they're taxing on I mean, they tax on everything. You get taxed when you buy a car, you get taxed when you sell the
For sure.
car. I
Yeah.
mean, you don't own
Eh,
anything.
yeah, yeah, and I don't know if you saw California starting to initiate an out-of-state tax. There's a bill up that you have to pay a certain fee if you just move out of the state just to exit. So that I think that's
Of
coming to
course, because they're
yes,
trying to deter people from leaving their state. It's just a bullying
precisely.
tactic.
Yes. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
that's the thing too, is we've been bleeding out here, but people don't see that because we're also taking in a huge influx of immigrants. We have a ton of
Mhm.
Somali immigrants, as
Yes.
well as now they're bringing up a lot of the immigrants from the southern border as well. I mean, it's just it's crazy. Like
Yep.
it's this is not what I thought it would be like to raise a family. You know,
Mhm.
you don't ever expect it to be like this.
Right.
It's been a nightmare.
Well, good thing you're homeschooling. All right, number 3. Oh, the other thing about that too is the state is becoming so ubiquitous. I get the sense too. It's not even just a sense. We know this from the figures that the bishops are owned by the government. We don't have that direct pay
Mm,
system like in Canada or Germany,
yeah,
wherein obviously the person who's making sure there's food on the table is some government official in Stuttgart. So you're going to
yeah,
be, loyal to the government there.
right.
But it's just through Catholic Relief Services
Oh,
or this
exactly.
program or that program. I mean, the Archbishop Supich here, he doesn't even feign to appeal to the everyday congregant in the pews
Right.
because their bread and butter is government programs.
Oh yeah, and that's one thing when I was running our pregnancy center, we all agreed, my board and I, we were like, we're never taking government funding, not even a small grant.
Right.
And it was called the grant that they would offer pregnancy centers is called the Positive Alternatives Grant.
Uh-huh.
Well, now the state is attacking pregnancy centers because they have the power to do so. And they're I think our attorney general classified them with a consumer alert, like a consumer warning alert, that
Mhm.
kind of things. I mean, they're just like super nasty and they're taking away their funding and things like that. It's
Yeah.
just been horrible.
Right. Yeah. Okay, number 3, the uh the Catholic curious who end up going Orthodox.
Hmm. Yeah. How much does that bother me? I would say probably like a 7. It
Mhm.
bothers me a lot, but I understand it,
Yep. I get
you
it.
know?
I get it.
Um,
Especially because many of those national churches are in Eastern Europe, and Eastern Europe is re-embracing traditional values,
oh,
and it
100%.
has
Yeah.
enormous social benefit and ramification and economic, uh, outcomes that are so positive. So, yeah, you can understand the allure, and
Yeah.
especially because they saw what a state-owned church, how it operates, and they don't wanna
Hmm.
have any part of that, you know?
Yeah. I mean,
Although
it's
Poland is
interesting.
worrying. I think Poland is
Yeah. I
lost.
mean, it's sad to see where Poland is going and Ireland, all
Mhm.
these very traditionally very Catholic countries.
Yeah.
It was interesting. I pick up milk. We buy raw milk at a farm like 45 minutes away from here.
Mhm.
And the wife is from Romania.
Mhm.
And said something to me. I was kind of surprised because it's a very Protestant area. It's where I grew up. And there are almost no Catholic churches out there, and the ones that are out there are very Protestantized.
Mhm.
Hardly even you can
They're
hardly
not functioning,
differentiate.
yeah. Yeah.
And she said something, yeah, we celebrated Catholic Easter. She started following me on Instagram. And so I think she
Ah!
realized I was Catholic. And I was like, well,
Yeah.
that's interesting. And she goes, yeah, but I didn't get to celebrate it the way that I wanted to, but we celebrate Orthodox Easter too, because my family in Romania are Orthodox. And I was like, that makes so much sense. Like,
Mhm.
I totally understand that. And I just was like, wow, I can't believe that she's out here in the middle of nowhere in the boonies,
Yeah.
where it's just all Protestant. And she's probably actually an Orthodox. Like, that
Right.
would be really hard. Anyway, I just
Yeah.
was super amazed by that, but it makes a lot of sense. Yeah, she's from Romania. Her family's
Mhm.
Orthodox, so she celebrates, I guess, Catholic Easter and Orthodox Easter.
Yeah. She's
Yeah.
running the full gamut out there.
Yeah, exactly. I was like,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
Wow, yeah. And Romanian people are beautiful people. I've
Yeah,
never I've
she
never
really
encountered a
is.
Romanian person with whom I had problems. It was always cordial. Beautiful too, just beautiful women, handsome men. Really a
Yeah.
great people. All
Yeah.
right, number 4, America Magazine.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Well, yeah, like 10 out of 10. Oh my goodness.
Look out, Father Reese. Here she
Oh,
comes.
man alive. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
But
Yeah.
yeah, it's just an
I just
again
shudder.
inversion. It's the demonic nature. I'm really I want to start a major campaign, whether it's among our trad fellow friends or people in our sphere. I really think maybe the renewal of the church comes before that has to come the suppression of the Jesuits.
Just so sad. It
Yeah.
just, like, makes me so sad because the
Used to be
order.
Taylor I love when Taylor Marshall calls them the former Navy SEALs of the church.
Yeah, I
It's a
mean,
great it's a great analogy with
yeah.
Francis Xavier actually on a boat going to India and China. I mean, the and Loyola, I mean,
Well, but the Franciscans too have been reduced.
oh,
You
and
know,
well,
the
all of
Francis
the order.
because
I mean, my
Saint
own Dominican
Francis
order
was
has been
going
reduced.
and proselytizing with emperors and stuff like that at risk of his own death. And
Yes.
people are like, "Oh, but, only oh, preach the gospel always, but only use words when necessary." It's like, he never said that, and he didn't do that.
No. And yeah,
It's just like,
exactly. I
what
mean,
are you talking
he
about?
might have had that spirit, but he never said just lay down. He went in front of the Sultan, and the only
That's
reason the
what I
Sultan
meant.
spared his
Yes, the
life
Sultan. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
the only reason the Sultan spared his life was because he thought he was so crazy to have done it and so bold that he gave him a pass. By the way, other Franciscans did not earn
Yeah.
that pass. They were
No, they were
martyrs
martyred.
and are living in the glory of heaven. So, yep, that's America Magazine. Eeh.
Mm.
If there was ever a reason to bring back the censorship list, there it is.
Amen. For
No,
real.
number 5. Okay, this one's kind of long, but follow me. People who resort to saying that traditional schooling provides socialization.
Yeah, that's a 10 out of 10 for me.
All right, riff on that a little,
I mean,
Angela.
you saw how unsocialized my children are, so ignore
They were
that.
very social. Very
Just
social.
yeah, exactly. Well, that's it. I've had quite the opposite problem. My kids are a little
Yeah.
too social. And like, I wish they would be quiet
Uh,
more.
yeah.
But I mean, socialization that I actually find that public school kids or kids who go to a traditional school setting are least socialized because they're
Bingo.
around their peers all the time. They don't interact much with people that are younger than them or older than them, people who have disabilities.
Precisely.
It's not they're not interacting the same way with the world around them, and not in a natural way anyway. I mean, you're not
Mm,
always relegated to people that are exactly your age. That's not the real world.
yeah.
And two, I just think there's no expectation for them to care for younger people or to look up to older people to see those differences in those relationships because they are
Mhm.
inherently different. Yeah, no, I think that's a really weak argument in favor of traditional schooling. So I think it's always the people who don't want to acknowledge that the weird kids have weird parents more often than
Yes.
not.
Very true. That's the
Yeah.
major correlation. Do you
Mm-hmm.
think too, I've always suspected this, it's a system that not only inculcates them into the idea that the only other situations they're going to be like that where they have a similar age group with whom they are essentially relegated are in the army
Mm-hmm.
or on some collective farm, where
Yeah.
they're given tasks like as if they're Smurfs.
Right.
By the
Mm-hmm.
way, Smurfs, communist. Uh, Papa Smurf was Karl Marx. He had the beard, he had the red hat,
No
remember?
way.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Gargamel's just a capitalist. He's Adam Smith.
Oh,
He lives out on
wow.
his own castle, and he's always trying to get the Smurfs. He's trying to eat them, right?
Yeah.
Well, what was the what the Engels in Marx language was always the capitalists are just avaricious eaters. They're eating your souls. They're eating you from because of usurpation or what's the word? Exploitation.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah,
That's so interesting.
yeah. So I guess your kids are never gonna watch Smurfs again. Sorry if I ruined it for you,
They
kids.
never no, they have never. So,
Good thing. Good. All right, keep them pure. Yeah, I mean it's very, very bad for them. And do you think that I was getting to my suspicion as to why they do that, and that is, do you think that makes them vulnerable? We
oh,
have this war on children. It
100%.
makes them so vulnerable.
Yeah.
If you're not being able to communicate and recognize the signs of an aggressor or someone
Well,
who's trying to, is someone who's going to take advantage of you. I mean,
yes, and I think too, I mean, especially when I just think of those teen years, and if those are the people you're primarily exposed to and they're all bunch of other kids with like underdeveloped frontal lobes and no impulse
mhm.
control. Um, I don't think that's the most conducive environment for real flourishing. I mean,
No.
you're interacting with it's a feedback loop. Like you're,
Yes.
I just think that's not healthy either. I don't think we're meant to just be around people our own age. It's not natural.
Right. Absolutely. All right. Here's the last one. Okay.
Okay,
Now,
let's hear it.
I hope you take this in the right vein because it's more of a tongue-in-cheek one, but a black Cleopatra and a black Juliet.
Oh my gosh.
You know what I'm referring to?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, didn't they blackwash these characters?
Yeah, right. So
Yeah, yeah,
the English show has a black Cleopatra. She
yeah.
was not even
She
Egyptian,
was,
she was
yeah,
Greek.
she was Greek.
And then they have this Tom Holland. I don't know if you saw Tom Holland starring with
Mhm.
this woman she's not even, to call her mid would be a major compliment. And she
Just straight savage.
sorry.
God.
Uh, Feminism quotient on this show, -0.
Ah.
-50. So but yeah, the what do you think about the blackwashing?
Oh. I think, I mean, yeah, I mean, the blackwashing is just idiotic. I'll
Mm.
say like a 9 because it's funny. Like
Yes.
it's kind of funny. So
Yeah.
like as annoyed as I am, it's like humorous. I think it's so much worse to do that to someone like Cleopatra, who's an actual historical figure, than
Mhm.
Juliet, who was fictitious.
Sure.
There's something way worse about doing it to somebody who actually existed and was not African American at all.
Yeah.
Uh,
Oh, I know. I got to share with you. There's this. I hope you're not too sensitive about tongue-in-cheek, somewhat racial
no.
jokes, but this there's a comedian. Her name's Leonardo Joni. She wrote about she showed that meme about how Romeo and Juliet, Tom Holland is supposed to kill himself because he can't have her question mark. And then she wrote, this is so funny. She wrote, Romeo's family doesn't want him dating Juliet because even though her family is only 13% of the population of Verona, they commit 52% of the crime.
Oh my gosh. What? That is, I mean, she said the quiet part out loud.
I know. I just thought that was, I almost fell
Oh
off my
my
chair.
goodness.
Oh my God. She has no holds barred. No holds barred, Leonardo Joni. So,
Wow. I've never heard of her. That's actually funny.
oh yeah, that was hysterical. And
But like, so women can be funny?
I know, I know. I even texted a friend of mine is Robbie Bernstein on the Part of the Problem podcast with Dave Smith. And I text him right away. I go, I DM'd him. I said, she beat you to it because this is a great joke. And she goes, oh, I met her. We're gonna talk. We're gonna do a show together down in
Oh, that's
Texas. I'm like,
funny.
oh, I'll fly down there or whatever. So that would be a great show. But yeah,
That's
she
so
stole
funny.
his thunder for sure. Last thing about the blackwashing, though. I mean, I guess if I'm gonna be really black pilled about it, I actually all the blackwashing. You can't have a commercial without the interracial couple. Now, I think it's actually more. Um, corporatist and meant to I think they have such a low opinion of us, of the everyday American, the
Mhm.
American quotidien, if you want to use the French. It's like they think that that's going to arouse some racial enmity and hatred so they could therefore pit that, you
It's
know,
working in the African American community.
mm,
It's working in the African American community. I think they're more racist than most Caucasian people are, and the data bears that out. So I don't, and so that kind of goes back to your idea of like, are we just doing things to make for a dumb society that are people who are easy to control? I mean, that was honestly
yeah,
one of the reasons public school started, was to make people easier to control
right. And
and to,
as COVID
yes,
showed, they'd rather stay in their ignorance and not investigate and never be proven wrong than to face the humiliation of saying, "Ooh,
right,
I got tricked,"
yeah, yep, yeah.
you
And
know?
we just like totally damaged several years of these children's years of like development, like brain
Right.
development. These are years that you don't get back.
Exactly. This country, I think the West and modern society in general needs a Jeremiah moment, right? "Oh
Yeah.
Lord, you duped me and I let
Yeah.
myself be duped."
Yes.
Yeah. But from that point, he goes on to just be the beacon of truth for all of Israel right there. Of course, he meets a bad end, but it's justified.
Yeah.
He's
100%.
made holy in his sight. I mean, that's the only way we're gonna get back to that. So to have that type of humility. Yeah, and I
Mm.
think much of the left thinks it's like they think they're able to, like in Super Mario Brothers, hit a time warp and go back, and all of a sudden they're marching in Selma and they're, just it's just before Loving versus Virginia is about to come out, and they're all cultural warriors out there being heroic.
But do you think that so much of this is because we have no real problem, so we're bored and we have to create our own?
Yeah, I think it's more the stupid thing. I think
I
I
think it's like
really
a
think,
both and,
yeah, it
you
could
know?
it doesn't
I
have to
think
be
it
exclusionary, but
yeah.
um I see it, yeah, to a degree. People, is it boredom or is it just general dissatisfaction? You know, we we have all these trivial practices. We have all these, and none of them are oriented toward integration, fulfillment, both of soul, body,
Yeah,
general
it's
health and
all about
wellness.
division and divorce.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So if you can accomplish that by, again, racializing everything, just as like uh the aforementioned Dave Smith said, and I'll leave you with this because I know we're running late, but Dave Smith always said, if you want to look at when wokeism really picked up, and you could just do LexisNexis searches on the internet, it's
Mhm.
really when the corporate world looked at the government and said, "Holy shit! As a result of 2008, we have this um, Tea Party movement of right wingers who are saying the government's fundamentally flawed. We don't want to be taxed like this anymore, and we're running up
Mhm.
deficits that are endangering our posterity, if not
Yeah.
ourselves." And then you have the Occupy Wall Street people, and they're all looking. They're kind of protesting together outside on Wall Street, and they're saying, "Well, actually, we agree with all of this stuff." And that's really when the powers that be in the establishment, whether they be in the corporate media or what have you, and the government just said, we got to crush this. And that's when JP Morgan's going to have a gay float in the St. Patrick's Day parade. It's when all of this transgenderism really starts to pick up and become more of a topic. I don't know about you, but I don't remember talking about transgenderism at all. It was just like maybe
I
Jamie Lee Curtis as a hermaphrodite came up once in a while, but that was it, right?
I feel like there were sort of whisperings of it when I was graduating high school in
Mhm.
2010.
Yeah,
Um
yeah.
it was sort of around that time that the trend was shifting, even where I lived in the middle of nowhere. I mean, my school was literally in a cornfield. We had one student there. His name was Jake, and he was transgender. He would present as a woman. He grew out his hair. He did his make. He was, but it was exactly like the Dylan Mulvaney style of
Is he
just
trying out for Juliet in the next film?
I have no idea. I wonder what happened to him. I felt bad because he was really picked on a lot,
Yeah,
and it's just
understandable.
not in my nature to pick on people who are
Especially if they're
clearly
suffering.
struggling.
Yeah.
I remember, yes, sticking up for him even though I was like totally disgusted by it. He's super vain. It's just the very
Mm,
caricature version of femininity, like the
yeah.
Dylan Mulvaney, oh, I'm getting my hair done. I'm gonna go take pills and then I'm gonna go shopping until I max out my credit card, like his new little song is, and then I'm gonna go do the walk of shame. It's just very not what
Ugh,
femininity or womanhood actually looks like. It's just
yeah.
this caricature.
I just threw up in my mouth, but
It's
yeah.
just yeah, it's really gross, but, I think a lot of people who are transgender, not all of them, but in sort of this cultural phenomenon that's occurring right now, a lot of them really do think that that's what it looks like and feels like to be a woman, and that just could not be further from the truth. And
Mm,
it's like, is this because of how they've been encultured? Is this what's because this is what's in the music, for
right.
example, but that's not most women's lived experience.
Oh, it's
Um
not? You're not going out to max out your credit card and
yeah, actually, we pay off our credit card every month.
hmm,
Um, we don't have any debt, so that's just not
what?
how we live, you
Yeah,
know?
that's good. That's good.
Yeah, but
Well,
yeah.
we're indebted to you.
Oh, that was a
For
very beautiful segue. Props
Well,
to
did you see,
you.
yeah,
That is
did you
impressive.
only a woman with a degree in rhetoric could say that that's a beautiful segue, and I actually take it as a compliment. Otherwise, it would be someone might say it's, oh, you're just being complimentary because you want to get off this damn show. But anyway,
I mean, both
Angela,
things can be true at the same time, you
oh,
know?
yeah, that's true. Let's not be exclusionary, right?
Yeah.
So, tell the audience where we could find your stuff and point us to what you're doing next and what you're excited about.
Yeah, so thank you for letting me do that. You can check out my YouTube channel. It's integrated with Angela Erickson. I do have a website, integratedangela.com. I'll be doing more writing over there I hope. It's hard to write as much as I would like to, but I do enjoy writing. I'm on Instagram as well. I think my handle is at Integrated Angela. I'm on Twitter, but I probably won't be on Twitter for much longer. I just don't find it a good place for dialogue, and so that's why I probably won't be staying there.
Mhm.
Um, but I also have a Telegram channel too. If you want, I could send that to you and you can throw it in the description or something. But people are always welcome to join in there. And then what's coming up on my channel? I did just interview Nancy Charles. So I really would encourage people to go listen to that interview. It's a
Please do.
phenomenal interview. And I will be interviewing Kennedy Hall about sort of the red pill movement
He's
coming up.
overrated.
Kennedy is a good guy.
Oh, I love him. Yeah, I just devoured Terror of Demons, and
Oh yeah,
now I'm reading SSPX, so I'm loving it. Everything he does, he's like the police song. Everything he does is magic. Every little
that's
thing.
so funny.
Yeah.
And then I'm interviewing Tom Nash coming up about his book from I think it's Emmaus Road Publishing with the St.
Mm.
Paul Center of Theology, but he's an apologist with Catholic Answers and stuff and writer, but he wrote this book called To Whom Shall We Go? And so it's an
Oh.
apologetics book about obviously staying in the Catholic Church, which I think we need right now.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, I'm sure I have other things coming up. I'll be doing an interview with someone about the history of Ireland and all kinds of stuff. So a
Wow.
huge variety coming up here soon.
Yeah.
So make sure you're
It-
subscribed and
yeah.
hit the bell to be notified when we go live. So
Ding ding. All right. Thanks, Angela Erickson. You're the
thank you so
best. We'll see you
much.
next time, okay?
God bless.